and she was taken from the maternity ward just after she had given birth to her baby daughter, Amethyst Vritschan, and transferred to the psychiatric ward unlawfully in violation of medical ethics, in violation of Belgian law, and in violation of constitutional law under the European Declaration of Human Rights and under the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. And at that hearing, although there were no grounds for it, the judge mandated an additional 30 days for an additional 30 days. I would call it incarceration of baby Amethyst in the neonatal ward in the hospital. So Melanie's here with us to tell us that story and to seek from you, our listeners, and our audience a crowdfunding so that she can hire the emergency lawyers in Belgium. They're asking for 2,000 euros to move forward for an emergency appeal to release her baby Amethyst from the hospital. And this is the crucial time when, just after they're born, and that's when they did it, when that is when the bonding takes place between mother and daughter, and that's the crucial time that is happening here. So I'm going to turn this over to Melanie Vritschan, who can tell us, you know, this international crime against humanity that has taken place and that continues to take place with baby Amethyst Vritschan, you know, torn away from her mother inside a hospital with psychiatric malpractice by 3 psychiatrists, by nurses, by doctors. Melanie taken to what we can call a CIA rendition facility within hours after having given birth. So over to you, Melanie, speaking to us today from Brussels, Belgium. It's late there, so she's just going to be with us for about an hour. Melanie, please bring us up to date, this horrible act that has happened.
Yeah, thank you, Alfred. Yeah, as you said, I was scheduled to give birth to my baby daughter Amethyst on the 18th of October by C-section. So we knew exactly when this would happen, and I had a friend staying over, Dr. Catherine Horton, who was already made a program also. Uh, I don't know if it was with you, or at least she has spoken publicly about what has happened. Yeah, so she came, you know, for a few days before from Switzerland to support me and to be with me during the birth, and also afterwards when I would have been at home with the baby, to give me a hand. So in the morning of the 18th, we drove to the hospital, which is a bit longer because it's on the other side of the city. It's one of the major university hospitals in Brussels, called Erasmus, or Erasme in French. And so we checked in, everything went fine, and they gave me my room. I had negotiated with my insurance that I could have a private room, that everything would be covered for the birth. And so we waited in the morning, and the C-section was scheduled at the beginning of the afternoon. And finally, I gave birth to a healthy baby at 4:30 in the afternoon. And then after the birth, I was pretty knocked out still from the anesthesia. And the only thing I remember is that Catherine was holding the baby, and there was a midwife that came to my bed, and she said that the baby needed a vitamin K injection, and if if I would authorize to give this. And I first said, well, isn't it possible to, you know, give this this vitamin K by mouth, you know, just rather than injecting her. And she said, well, yes, it is possible, but then you have to give it several times, and you have to continue at home. And if once she has to take medicine, then she will probably remember this not very well taste, and it will be difficult. So whereas here I give it once and then it's finished. So reluctantly I said yes, but I was still very much, how do you say, well, recovering from the anesthesia. And I just remember the two ladies left in the room to my left, and I had one nurse standing next to my bed, and she was checking my parameters, and I was absolutely exhausted. So I was like falling in and out of conscious. So I was half asleep. And then the versions differ what actually happened. I can only say what Catherine told me. She said that she was asked very insistently by this midwife why she was here and who she was in relation to me, and why she was here taking care of me when she was not even living in Belgium. And so unfortunately, Catherine started to talk about what we were doing, so that we were working together in the human rights organization that I have founded, ICATOR, the International Coalition Against Electronic Torture and Robotisation of Living Beings, that we work together to provide the victims of non-consensual experimentation with implant technology with the evidence, scientific evidence of the crimes committed against them. She then started to talk about these technologies, what you can do with them, and then I think that the versions really differ. So I wasn't present in the room, so I don't know exactly what was said. But to sum up, well, I was then allowed to in the room with my baby, and everything was fine. I was breastfeeding her. Everything was really wonderful little baby that, you know, in perfect health, and everything went well. And that night, nothing specific happened. Catherine finally, she went home very late at night, and she was supposed to come back in the next morning. Around midday, a little bit before maybe, suddenly the gynecologist who had operated me, who had done the C-section, came into my room, and I first thought it was just, you know, to check up on me, a regular gynecologist visit. And okay, she did check. She said, okay, you're fine, the baby's fine. And then she said, well, based on what I've heard, I have asked a psychiatrist to come round later to see you, because I have heard rather strange things about a conversation that your friend had yesterday with the midwife. And I was like, you know, I was quite surprised. I said, well, what conversation? And she said, well, she has spoken about what you do, and also about you in very worrying terms. And we are rather worried, and we would like to go on to the bottom of this matter. So I've asked the psychiatrist to come round based on this conversation. And I said, well, I know I wasn't present at this conversation. I don't know what was said. So she said, well, you know, I still asked the psychiatrist to come around, and she left. And sure enough, a few times afterwards, I did indeed get the visit of a psychiatrist, a certain Dr. Delay, a blonde lady, who came and who sat beside my bed, and she said, well, you know, it seems that you're hearing voices, and that you think that you're implanted with some kind of technology, and and all of your friends as well. This is very boring and so on. We would like to examine you psychiatrically, and your friend said very worrying things to this midwife. And I said, well, I'm sorry, I wasn't even present at this conversation. I really don't know what this is all about. And she said, oh, yes, your friend said very worrying things about you, that you were hearing voices that were telling you that they were going to kill your baby. And Catherine, by the way, she has said that she has never said such things. So here the versions between the midwife and Dr. Catherine Horton differ quite a lot. But I said, well, I wasn't present at this conversation. I don't know what was talked. And she said, well, you also said these kind of things. You confirmed these words. And I said, well, I didn't confirm these words. The only thing what I said when we were talked about is what I said to the nurse when she asked me about this, is that the only thing I can confirm that there was indeed a foreign body taken out of my throat. We had it analyzed in a laboratory specialized in nanotechnology and in biotechnology. And the people at the laboratory confirmed that this piece contains mainly of titanium fibers, aluminium, various metals, manganese. So I certainly should have not have this in my throat. This is the only thing I confirmed when the nurse asked me about this. But the rest, I wasn't present at the conversation. I don't know at all what was told. And then she said to me, well, I don't even know why you need to found this kind of association, because this sounds like totally delirious. I mean, it sounds like you all suffer from paranoid delusions. Why do you need to found this kind of association? And I said, well, I think this is our right, and she said, well, however it may be, I've asked other people will come and see you. So she left, and sure enough, very shortly afterwards, 3 ladies came into the room, and they introduced themselves as pedopsychiatrists. But before, there was a nurse came into my room, and she said, well, your baby, she seems to have changed color. We think she has maybe a jaundice. We would like to take her up to neonatal to have her checked. And I looked at her and I said, well, to be honest, I don't see that she has changed colors at all. I mean, she seems to have the same color than, since her birth. So, and she said, well, we're not sure, but, it's better to check. And so we'll just, take her up to the pediatrician and have him look at her. And if she's fine, she's coming down again. But yeah, so they took my baby, and I had a strange feeling about this, because she didn't look, to me she didn't look as if she had changed color, but okay. And then these 3 pedopsychiatrists came in, and they sat there, and they said, well, this was what has happened yesterday with your friend and yourself. This is very worrying. We cannot just ignore this story. You need to be hospitalized in psychiatry, and you will have to take medication. And and so there are 2 ways to do this. Either you will go, so to speak, voluntarily, on a voluntary basis, so that we can keep you with the baby. We'll send you in another hospital, but you will travel together, and you go on a voluntary basis so that we can assess the situation, because we're really worried for the security for the safety of the child. Or you will not comply. In this case, we'll get a prosecutor's order to force you. And I said to them, well, if you put it to me this way, I would rather go voluntarily than be forced. But I mean, it's not really a voluntarily, is it? I mean, it's like I'm being coerced. And if I do this, if I accept the so-called voluntary version, then one thing's for sure, I would not like to be medicated. And they said, oh yes, you need to take medication, for your delusions. And they then said, okay, well, we settle for the voluntary basis then, and we'll organize this with another hospital, Saint-Anne, Saint-Rémy, which is not far from Erasmus, and so we will organize this transfer tomorrow. And they left. And I was very shocked, and then I texted Catherine and another colleague saying, well, no, could you please come back pretty quickly, because based on the conversation that you had yesterday with a midwife, they now want to hospitalize me in psychiatry, and I would really like to know what was said at this conversation. So Catherine and my colleague George came back pretty quickly, and Catherine said that she met the chief gynecologist on the same floor. And she talked to her and she said, well, Melanie has told me that you want to hospitalize her in psychiatry. What is this about? And the chief gynecologist, Dr. Dalmans, something like that, said to her, well, no, it's not that we want to hospitalize her at all. It's that she has asked for this. So as if I had said to them, hello, I would like to be hospitalized in psychiatry because I don't feel well. And she said to her that I had said that this would be the best. I was like, well, as if I had asked for it. So Catherine came into my room and she said, well, she asked the lady, she said, well, can you come with me, because I would like to double check this with Melanie. And she asked me, did you ask to be hospitalized in psychiatry? And I said, of course I didn't. And then we had like a panel of, I don't know, three, Dr. Friedrich Melzen, a psychiatrist, the three pedophile psychiatrists, two nurses, the head gynecologist, George, Catherine, and I in the room. And there was a whole panel. And in the meantime, I had talked to a lawyer, and she said, well, be sure to note down the names of these psychiatrists who took this decision. So Catherine, at that moment, she just did what the lawyer told us to do. She asked everybody in the room what was their name. And so they started to say their names. And at that point, we were talking about the situation and how it happened. And I said, well, you call this a voluntary how do you say, commitment, but it's not really voluntarily. I was coerced, and also you told me that I should take medication, which I don't agree to. And so at that point, the two psychiatrists, the psychiatrist Dr. Friedrich Milcent and the pedopsychiatrist Dr. Zambut said, oh, well, we don't have to be subject to this interrogation here at all, or this meeting. She said to Catherine, you're asking for our names? No, you're getting really threatening. And she said, well, we don't even have to be subjected to this. We'll just call the police. And they went out. They told Catherine that she had to leave. They told George that they had to leave, so they were removing the witnesses. And they called the police. So once my two friends had left, there were two police officers that came, and it told me to clear out all my cupboards and so on, because I would be transferred. So I had to, the next day after cesarean section, put all my wrap up all my clothes, put them back in the suitcase and so on. And then the police officers came pretty late. And so I had told the psychiatrist, I said, well, before you take these decisions, if you're really so worried about this piece that's what was removed from my throat, I have all the medical evidence here, so maybe you want to have a look at this before taking this decision. And this psychiatrist, Dr. Friedrich Milcent, said, oh, no, we're not looking at any medical pieces. We're not the police, anyway, it's all organized, you're going to psychiatry. So when the two police officers arrived, and one of them was called Officer Cowles, Catherine even has his number, his professional number. He was very nice. When they came, they were like, what's this about? Why? And they said, Catherine, spoke to them on the phone, and she said, "Why are you here?" And I said, "Well, for a procedure. You know, we're here on the prosecutor's order." And they asked me a little bit what was going on, and I explained what had happened. And I said, well, and I mean, if this worries everybody so much, you know, I mean, I can prove that I was telling the truth, or that my friend had been telling the truth. Here's my computer. Here's the medical report of this foreign object that was removed from my throat. If this whole fuss is all about this, I can prove it, and I hope that the discussion should end here. And so the police officer Cowles looked at it, and it says in the report that there was a black piece of quite big dimensions removed from my throat. And he looked at it and he said to the doctor, to the psychiatrist, Dr. Wilson, I think you should have a look at this before taking this decision. I think you should look at this, you know, at her medical report. And so he came back very reluctantly. He looked at it like 2 seconds, and he said, well, anyway, it's all organized now. So the two police officers took me to another hospital, which is called Hospital Brugman in Brussels, to have, so to speak, independent other psychiatric assessment. I was taken into a room, and there I still had my mobile, and so at least I could communicate with Catherine once the psychiatrist had left the room, to tell her what was going on. And by this time, it was by the time we finished, it was close. It was 2 o'clock, or even later than 2 o'clock. And he asked me a few questions, which I found rather strange. For example, he asked me questions like, where was I in the payment of my mortgage for my house, for my apartment? Where do I stand with the payments? I don't see what this has to do with a psychiatric evaluation. And if I had at the moment a companion, a boyfriend, sexual relations, and so I don't think that's really his business either. So I was asked things like this. And finally, when I showed him, I mean, I explained to him why this all happened, that this was all based on a conversation my friend had with a midwife, but that I could confirm that there was a foreign body removed from my throat. And I showed him the medical report, and he looked at this and he was like, oh, well, I think what we're going to do is that you're going to return back to maternity, okay? To the maternity ward. I just need to step out, do a few phone calls, and we'll transfer you back to maternity. This was his assessment. So he left, and at that point I could call Catherine, and I told her, well, you know, don't know what the hell is going on here, but now this psychiatrist has just said that they're going to retransfer me to Erasmus in the maternity ward. So fine. A few minutes later, he came back, and he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, madam. Now it's all out of my hands. It has been changed. This Nixon directive, and that's the directive for mentally ill people that you're able to lock them up, is now positive. So you're gonna go back to Erasmus, but you're gonna go to psychiatry, and your baby is neonatal." So he said, unfortunately now, it's after 2 o'clock in the morning. I cannot organize the transport tonight. It is too late? So what we're gonna do is you're gonna sleep here, but you're gonna sleep in a room where we have to lock you up completely. We will take all your possessions and lock them up. And he showed me a room where there were just this kind of bunk beds where they strap people down, you know. And he said, well, we won't strap you, but you have to sleep here. They told me to remove all my clothes, and there was a guy who gave me this kind of nightgown or so from the hospital, and he was watching whilst I was changing. And he said they took all my possessions and locked them up. And I said, well, if you have to go to the bathroom, there's a red button here you have to call. And if I called them during the night, they took really a very long time to answer me. So in the morning, then finally, the the ambulance arrived to transfer me back to Erasmus, but to the psychiatric unit, of course. And when I arrived there, I arrived in some kind of almost cellar or so in the basement, in a very dark unit, where they have all cells for agitated people, you know, people that are basically considered raving lunatics. And I was placed there in complete isolation. So you have this cell where there's no bell, nothing, no window, just a camera on you. And you have basically just a mattress on the floor. And there I waited still in complete isolation, without painkillers, after 24 hours after a C-section, without any painkillers, about 3 or 4 hours certainly, until they finally opened the door and said, well, now your bed is ready in psychiatry. And so I was moved back to psychiatry, where I was placed into a room next to a lady who was obviously really not very, I mean, you know, in her right mind. So, and she was very hostile when I arrived because she didn't want to have a roommate. And there I spent about 5 days without visiting rights, because obviously the message had gone out that I was held there. So there were a lot of phone calls asking for my well-being. And I got a lot of visitors also the first days. And finally, I was told that I was getting too many phone calls and too many visits here. So the visiting rights had also been removed. So nobody from my family, nobody could speak to me or come to visit me before the judge came by. This was on the 25th, as you rightly said. Until the hearing. At the hearing, finally, the psychiatrist told me on the day before that, you know, the maximum time you can keep a person, and by the way, they were medicating me, forced medicating me also. You can keep a person, which had a devastating effect on my mind. I was really not myself anymore. I couldn't concentrate. I was like totally knocked out by this medication. I'm not used to take this kind of medication at all. So they told me that the maximum time you can keep a person under observation, as they call it in Belgium, is 40 days. So they said, well, when the judge comes by tomorrow, we're going to ask for the 40 days. By the way, I wanted to breastfeed my baby, so I had they wouldn't let me see my baby because my baby has been placed 30 days without any contact to any family members, anybody. Being allowed any contact in the neonatal service of the hospital, having no need of neonatal care because she's perfectly healthy. I had then asked for a machine so that I could pump up the milk, and I had asked them to give the milk to my baby at least if I could not breastfeed her. And they said, no, you have to throw that away. I mean, you can pump it up to basically to keep the flow going, so to speak, but we will not give this to your baby. We'll give her artificial milk, which is what I wanted to avoid. I also could not do this in my room, so until I think Monday night, I didn't even have on my side any electricity. So I had to get up every 3 hours, go to in the bathroom cabinet to pump my milk, which I had then to throw away in the sink because they wouldn't give it to my baby, which upset my neighbor, who was already not very happy to have a roommate a lot, and she was keeping complaining about me and that I was using this machine. In the bathroom. So this was all very, very difficult circumstances. Also, they medicated me, they force medicated me. And as I said, they forbid all visitors. So on the 25th, we then had the hearing. There were 2 psychiatrists present, and there was my lawyer and a psychologist who has followed me and my family for about seven years, who has made a statement that I've never been a danger to anyone, and in her opinion, absolutely not delusional. And Dr. Katrin Horton was there because she was, my incarceration in the hospital was based on her conversation with this midwife. So the psychiatrists start talking, and they started out with saying, well, you know, we're very worried because Madam has founded this association with people that claim to have been implanted non-consensually. You see, so the judge says it's very worrying to us. And so the judge said, okay, well, this is about her group, but what about your diagnosis? You know, because to be able to lock somebody up 40 days, there have to be different criteria that have to be reunited. The person has to be proven mentally ill. She or he has to be a danger to herself or others. There has to be no other possibility available than to lock the person up, no alternative solution. And the third one is that the person refuses to be medicated. So the judge asks, okay, you know, doctor, that's fine, but that's about your group. But what about your diagnosis? Is there any mental illness that you could diagnose? And the two psychiatrists looked at each other and they were like, well, no, not really. We couldn't, this couldn't be established. We couldn't establish any mental illness. She said, okay, well, right. What about her danger, the danger that she poses? Does she pose a threat to herself or to others? Again, they looked at each other and they were like, no, this could not be established. So the judge said, well, okay, in this case it's clear. Madam, you're free to go. So this was, I mean, you know, the psychiatrists looked rather, you know, rather ridiculed themselves because it's not logical that they would ask for the 40 days confinement when they could not establish any mental illness, and by their own saying they said I was not a danger to no one. I mean, not to myself and not to others. So it's, you know, it's kind of illogical then to ask for 40 days confinement. And in this case, okay, the judge told me that I would be free, but to have this decision written up and to officially notarize the psychiatry, it would take 1 day. So I could leave the hospital on Thursday. And in this case, I asked, okay, tonight there's a possibility for people who really want to come and visit me. Tonight, now that this decision has been taken, can I have visitors? And they said, no, until this decision is not written up, the same rules apply. So tonight you cannot even have, you can also don't have visitors. You can see everybody you want to see tomorrow when you're out. So the next day I was supposed to get out. They just told me, you know, don't forget that you have to come by the office because we still need to give you the prescription for physiotherapy, because indeed I have the right to have a physiotherapist who will come to massage my scar. So when I went to the office, they gave me this prescription, but also they gave me a prescription for, you know, like anti-anxiety drugs. They gave me a new appointment with my psychiatrist. And they gave me a little bag with already some medication in there and said, well, this is the best that you take this today. And I said, well, you know, so we have given you everything. I said, well, you can give it to me, but I mean, I don't know if you have understood the decision of the judge yesterday. I'm free to go. I have no obligation any more to your unit here or to take any medication or to go to an appointment that you're giving me. And then they said, well, you know, if you want to take the responsibility to stop your treatment by yourself, then it's up to you, but this will probably have consequences. So I checked with my lawyer and she said, you're totally right. The judge ordered you free to go. There was no mental illness that could be detected or no danger to yourself or to others. So, you know, you don't have to take this medication and you don't have to go to psychiatric appointments. So, you know, so we left. This was for me, but the problem is now that my daughter is still held for 30 days with the you know, by the youth judge, who is called Cerc, I have her name. She ordered my daughter 30 days to be held in neonatal with no contact to any family members and to no one actually. My lawyer and I, we have tried to have her change this judgment, because it's not logical. If I'm not considered mentally ill or no danger to myself or to others, why is my daughter still held there for 30 days without being allowed any contact to her family? We tried to get visiting rights. For me, at least, that I could visit her. The judge also refused. So there is a big court battle now that is preparing, and I really need support to be able to face these legal costs that will probably be quite important now that this seems to be geared up to become quite a battle, because the judge does not want to listen to what would be common sense, that if I'm not a danger to myself or to others and I'm not considered mentally ill, why are they keeping my baby? I can't hear you, Alfred.
Yeah, sorry.
You have to, yeah.
I had my mute on. Yeah, we have about 20 minutes left in the segment, and so you've spoken to one lawyer,
Yes.
maybe one or more lawyer that would go in and do this emergency appeal to get baby Amethyst out. What did that lawyer say?
Well, there is an appeal, yeah, but unfortunately, she's not a pro bono lawyer. So if I want to, her to take the case, which I think I want to, this will probably take about will cost about 2,000 euros that I would need to be, able to file this appeal. She has already done various things. She has written to the youth judge and say, well, I think you should modify now this court order, because madam is out, the mother is out. There's no mental illness that could be detected and no threat to her, to herself or to others. So I think the baby should be returned to the mother. The judge said that she did not want to talk to her, and she said, well, this is an urgent matter. Could I please talk to you on the phone about this? The judge did not want to talk to her. She maintains this order of 30 days at least confinement. The psychiatric unit continues to send me text messages with various appointments in psychiatry, where I have no intention to go and no obligation to go. So the judge has said, well, I've put the matter now in the hands of the youth aid, and so we try to have an appointment there with my lawyer to also convince them that there's no need to keep my baby. But also the youth aid said, well, they couldn't speak to us, and we will need to see them first before we can file this appeal before the 6th of November, because now it's the All Saints holidays here and everybody's out. So that means another week without my daughter being permitted to see me or any other member of the family. And so she's still held alone there in neonatal with people that are, well, nurses that she doesn't really know, and without being allowed to have any contact to her family. So the judge obviously does not want to take her responsibilities, because she could have changed this order if she wanted. There was enough grounds for her to be able to do this, but she said that she didn't want to speak to my lawyer, and she wanted to wait until she has the report from the youth aid. So yeah.
Yeah. Now I'm looking up at the website of the organization actually that you founded, Icator, and it's got a GoFundMe page there, and so you have a class action to stop electronic torture and mutilation by the intelligence agencies.
Yes, correct.
And so is that the page that people would go to?
Yes, we will update the page tomorrow because our webmaster will do this tomorrow.
Okay.
We still have this class action running. This is ongoing, but we will put the new request for funding there. The reason, which is
Yeah.
basically to free my baby Amethyst
Yeah.
from the clutches of these of the state, which
So
where it's currently held. So this description will be on the website under the GoFundMe page as of tomorrow.
in a in a certain way, you can consider Amethyst a victim of within the umbrella of the ICATOR program,
Yeah.
because
So
she certainly, you have been a target, and you were targeted in the hospital
yes.
by these forces, because you were targeted there by unlawful psychiatric diagnoses and actions taken against you unlawfully, without any justification, after even there was a medical diagnosis saying there is no psychiatric diagnosis, and mandating you back to the maternity ward. So there must have been a behind the scenes manipulation that came down. And currently we have the judge that is doing everything possible to be non-transparent and to maintain an order that for which there is no factual basis. How does you've been face to face with that judge? How does this
I've not been face
square?
to face with that judge because there are
Oh,
two
you have
different
not.
judges. You see, there
Oh,
is
so,
the
sorry.
police
Could you
judge.
say that again? I didn't get
I've
that.
not been face to face with that judge because these are two different procedures. You
Oh,
see,
I see.
face to face with the peace judge who ordered my immediate release.
Oh, I see.
But the what concerns my daughter is a different
Oh,
different
is a
procedure,
different
and it's a
judge.
different judge. It's a youth judge.
Oh,
Yeah. The irony of this is that in their promotion, this hospital Erasmus very clearly, I mean, puts forward that that have recently gained the label of friends of the babies, you know. And what I can say is the way I have been treated there, and my daughter has been treated there, you know, I have big doubts about that they have actually merited this label, you know, friends of the babies.
yeah, yeah. Now, so on what grounds? What grounds do they have for not immediately dissolving the order to hold baby Amethyst for 30 days? If there's no, there are no factual grounds to hold her, because there is no valid diagnosis, no valid psychiatric diagnosis. Therefore, there is no possibility of harm.
Yeah, there's indeed none. So, and nobody
Yeah,
understands why my baby is still held there. I haven't seen her since 19th of October. And since
yeah,
19th of October, she has had no contact with, neither with me, neither with my son, you know,
yeah,
her elder brother, or my father, who's the grandfather. So she's, since 19th of October, she's held there and taken care of by complete
yeah,
strangers, and without no contact permitted to her family. So, and there's no grounds to hold her there. There's nobody sees the reason why she should still be held when I have been considered mentally totally sane and no danger to myself or others.
yeah,
So
yeah.
nobody
So
given back to me immediately.
right, right. Uh, uh, so this is like a complete. So now, baby Amethyst is being held hostage by the transhumanist agenda, and because all of a sudden we're up against a legal wall that has no factual justification
Correct.
behind it, and is carrying out unlawful orders, orders that in fact have no basis in fact, correct?
Yeah, they have no basis in fact. That's correct.
Yeah.
And so to be able to, counter this and get my baby back, I would really need help.
Yeah, yeah, and so
I can
people
hire
can
a
go
lawyer
to,
to start this procedure.
yeah, so people can go to icator.be, that's ICATOR.be. We'll have that in the article that will accompany this this interview, and they can donate. Now, 2,000 euros, I think a euro is about $1.20 US, I think, more or less. So that's about $2,200 now. And I think that's about standard. Most of the things that we saw that now, and they don't have legal aid in Belgium, I guess.
No. So
Oh,
I'll have to pay the.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so this just seems like harassment of the citizenry,
Yeah,
isn't
absolutely.
it? I mean, and it's harassment of a mother and a newborn baby. I mean, it's a crime against humanity, isn't it? I mean, it just right at the most vulnerable point of civilization. There probably is no more vulnerable point of civilization than that.
Yeah. Yeah, correct. Yeah, it is a crime against humanity. Yeah, what has
Yeah,
happened.
yeah, and so you would then take your lawyer and would go and file the appeal at the
Yes.
youth court.
Yeah.
And the youth court is saying that you can't talk to them until what?
Until
Yeah.
I've seen the youth aid, which they have appointed to assess the situation. So
The youth aid,
the
and
judge
what
would
does
have
the youth aid say?
power. The youth aid said that I couldn't see them before 6th of November. So that means we're losing another week where she has it's not permitted any contact to me or to any other family.
Because they have holidays, is that it?
Yes.
So that there's no taking into account of the emergency
Yes.
because of the health, because it is acknowledged that separating a newborn from its mother and interfering with that bonding is probably the worst single thing that can be done to a newborn
Yes.
and to the mother.
Also, it's very traumatic. Yeah, it
Yeah,
was
it's
very
very,
traumatic
very, yeah.
what I was living, but I can't even imagine. I don't even to think what my daughter is living through right now.
Yeah, yeah, and right, right, and so today is October 30th. So, well, and is there a way to jump over that by going to higher court and getting an injunction? I guess everybody's on vacation or something.
Yeah, everybody's on vacation now, so we have to file this appeal. It is possible to file an appeal like an emergency appeal. That's what we're
Yeah.
trying to do.
Yeah.
That's why I need, the money
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
able
Yeah.
to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll do this
Oh
as an
my God.
emergency
So
appeal.
yeah, so that the people who work in these, it's like you go back to the Nuremberg judgments. I was just following orders.
Yeah,
I was just
correct.
following orders. Oh, I was just following orders. Look, my calendar says that I have vacation and I don't meet till the 6th, and it doesn't matter that irreparable harm is happening to a newborn. I was
Yeah,
just following orders.
yeah, it is correct. And even, I mean, I spoke today to the people in the social services in Erasmus, and also to the people in that in the neonatal unit, and they said to me, well, they understand me as a mother, And it's certainly better, I mean, it's certainly important that the child sees his mother and that we are in contact. But the judge gave them this court order, so they're just following orders. That was precisely what they told me on the phone.
Yeah.
We are just executing orders.
Yeah. You're just following orders now. Now, so is the best way for people to reach you through icator.be, icator.be.
Yeah,
Is that
it's
the
through
best
my
way?
email,
Yeah.
melanie.vritschan.icator@gmail.com. Maybe we
Okay.
can mention it again in the program if people want to contact me, especially
Sure.
via the Icator email.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Well, we're reaching toward the end here of the time. Do you
Okay.
have any things that you had wanted to say that perhaps you didn't get an opportunity to bring up?
No, I just would like to say to the public, please help me get my baby back.
Oh, good, good,
Yeah.
good. Okay, so yes, we wish you all of the best, and we're all with you. And I know that this has been covered extensively, and we just reach out to our audience and just ask them to really reach out and support Melanie and Amethyst. They're being targeted by the shadow government of the global war machine. The National Security Agency is behind this. They are the ones that are behind the the um, the transhumanist agenda. It's the National Security Agency. We've already determined that it was Motorola that has designed, and the National Security Agency that has rolled out, along with the CIA, with a tremendous infrastructure that has even corrupted the chief of police of Brussels.
Mm.
I've even submitted an affidavit in this ongoing lawsuit to stop electronic torture and mutilation by the intelligence agencies of Brussels that are active in Brussels. It's all run by the American military. Brussels is the headquarters of NATO, so they have all the NATO intelligence agencies behind it. And they're all focused on Melanie Vritschan and baby Amethyst now, because this evidence has busted wide open. You can go
Yes.
through all of the programs that we've done, and Melanie has been able, because now the implant has been surfaced and has been taken out surgically, and we see this little design thing that was designed by DARPA and was manufactured by Motorola under a program developed by the National Security Agency and implemented through NATO, that wants to chip everybody in Europe and eventually in the world. And now that's what's surfacing here, and that's what's behind and holding baby Amethyst in the hospital. And that's what's mind controlling the judge in this case in violation of the Nuremberg principles, to go from the top and then down to the Belgian regulations, down to the to the hospital medical ethics. Sorry, I just had to get all of that in. And that's all in programs, established factually in programs that Melanie Vritschan has done with News Inside Out that will accompany this interview. So you see that all of this is factually based. We really want to thank you. You have enormous strength, enormous integrity, enormous character. And I know that you and your daughter, Amethyst, you have the hopes of the world, and that you will come out of this okay. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much for this interview.
certainly. And okay then, until we speak again, and the best, and
Thank you.
the force is with you, as they say.
Thank you.